So last month I looked at using the GraphicsMagick command line utility to paste one image onto another image. And I did so using the natural dimensions of the source image. But GraphicsMagick also has a way for you to scale the image as you draw it or paste it onto another image. And that's what I have here in this demo. You can see that I can select an image and we then paste that image onto a canvas using different width dimensions. You can see I'm just sort of spacing them out here so they don't overlap. And let's take a quick look at how that's working under the hood. So if we jump into the code, we have our input file path. We're going to get the dimensions of the input image so that we understand how to scale it as we draw it onto the generated canvas. And we're going to draw it at these particular widths: 10 pixels, 50 pixels, 100, 200, 300. And what I'm going to do is generate the dash draw commands. Oops, let me turn off word wrap. We're going to generate the dash draw commands. So we're going to create an array of draw commands, and then I'm going to spread that array into my GraphicsMagick convert utility. So you can see here I'm creating a canvas of the output dimensions on a very, very light gray, drawing the images at those various dimensions, and then outputting the file path, and that output file is what we're seeing here. So let's take a quick look again at how we draw these, how we generate these draw commands. So for each dimension, right, for each 10, 50, 100, so on and so forth, I get the scale of the particular image. So essentially, how much are we scaling down the input image to, say, 100 pixels? And then I use that draw scale to figure out what the height of the image is, right? Because we know what the width is going to be, but now we need to calculate the height based on the scaling. And then I'm going to generate the draw command. Image over just means compositing the two at the XY coordinates, and then here you can see the second set of coordinates is the width and the height of the image. So this is going to be the scaled dimensions of the input image as they're being pasted onto that canvas, and that's what we see here. Now this was working really well as I was going through these. The problem is eventually I hit a CMYK image, and you can see that the CMYK image shows up really crazy, almost like an inverted image, I guess is what's happening here, and I don't know why that's happening. But ideally what we want is to convert the CMYK image to the RGB color space as part of the paste operation. Now I could not find a way to do that as part of this draw subcommand. So what I did was I created a second approach to this in which we generate intermediary images for our draw operations, and then use the intermediary image as the input instead of just pulling in the original input and scaling it down. So let's take a look at that version. So all the code is basically exactly the same, with the exception of now when we're generating that array of draw commands, we're going to be generating an intermediary file. So you can see here, again, we have our draw widths. And what I'm going to be doing is creating an intermediary MIF file, or magic image file format, and that's a lossless image file format. And I want to use lossless because I didn't want to lose image quality simply because we're creating an intermediary file. So this time we're going to run it through an intermediary GraphicsMagick command here, and you can see I'm going to be reading in the original image, resizing it down to the given width, so the scaled width. You can see I'm not providing a height, so I'm going to let GraphicsMagick figure out what the scaled height should be on its own. So this simplifies it a little bit. I'm going to be converting to the RGB color space. So that CMYK image is going to be now generated as an RGB temporary file. And then my draw command now, instead of using the input image, uses my temporary MIF file. And you can see here for the scaled dimensions, I'm just providing 0, 0, which tells GraphicsMagick to use the natural dimensions of the input image. But because I've already scaled the image when I created the temporary MIF file, that means that the natural dimensions are already the scaled dimensions. And then the rest of the code is exactly the same. You can see that I'm again taking those draw commands and spreading them into my parent convert. Canvas is still generated in the same way. And now if we jump over here and we click on that CMYK, you can see we now have the sort of RGB equivalent-esque of that CMYK color space. And if we click around here, you can see that we have similar outputs even with the intermediary files. Now, because we're generating intermediary files, we're doing more file I/O, which means that this is going to be a bit slower. So for example, here, if we jump back to this beach, you can see it takes 2.4 seconds. If I do the same one using the intermediary files, see it says 2.59, right? So 2.4 versus 2.5 seconds. So a little bit slower, not by any huge degree, but one thing that I did notice was that even with the intermediary file, you can see if I go back and forth between the two different versions, the quality of the image scaled down and pasted onto the generated canvas is essentially the same, which means that whatever algorithm this scaled width and height is using in the draw sub operation, it's pretty good. It's comparable to what we'd be using using the resize command. So that was a nice thing to kind of proof of concept that the quality is not going to degrade too crazily without being able to supply some sort of resize algorithm. So anyway, again, I'm still getting used to GraphicsMagick and figuring out how I need to be able to leverage it, but anyway, hopefully this was helpful, showing that we can resize images as we draw them onto another image, and using it in a way that we can get the CMYK color space to work reasonably well.